So it's not about getting out of Earth School curriculums, right? I got a divorce. I moved across the country. I had times of having $2 in my bank account, so I would still have my curriculums, but in knowing this truth, that there's no spot that God is not, or the fullness of God is everywhere present, like it just brings more grace. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt like hell sometimes, but it just brings grace.
Welcome to Settling is Bullshit, a sweary podcast about claiming your joy. If you are an adult human craving healthier boundaries, a greater sense of purpose, or an increased capacity to feel at ease in your own skin, then you are in the right place, my friend. I'm your host, Kate Blauk, and I'm here to offer you practical tools and playful encouragement to help you step forward and be your most awesome self. My hope is that each episode will leave you feeling a bit more empowered to make brave choices and claim your joy. Hello, my love. Welcome to today's episode about trusting the divine and really leaning into our relationship to spirit, to source, to God, to higher power, whatever name we want to give it. This is the most spiritual episode we have had so far, and it makes sense to me that I am talking to the most spiritual, wonderful, bright, shiny human in my sphere about all of this stuff. Today's guest is Julie Day, someone very near and dear to my heart. I have worked one-on-one with Julie around astrology readings, as well as we worked together pretty closely around my relationship programming a number of years ago. And Julie is hugely responsible for helping me cultivate a relationship with God, with Source, with my higher power that is really loving and expansive. That's a huge component of 12-step recovery. And Julie is a spiritual counselor. That's her deal. So I'm really stoked to have her on here to talk to you about light and hope and love in these really chaotic and crazy times. Julie Elizabeth Day is a spiritual counselor licensed by the Agape International Spiritual Center. She's also a spiritual astrologer and has a really wonderful community going over on Substack. Julie is here to help remind you of what is fundamentally true, that right where you are is exactly where your higher self would have you be, learning and growing in perfect order, that you are held by an unconditionally loving God, that you are not alone, and that life is for you and never against you. Those are just some of the really juicy messages that Julie shares in her teachings and on this podcast that you're about to listen to. And I just love the exuberant way that Julie talks about spirituality. It's really in alignment with how I show up, and I love how she shows up. And it was such a treat to get to show up together. The end of the episode is a little atypical in terms of my formatting. So if you like what you hear, go to the show notes at the end and visit Julie's website at thejulieday.com. Or please, please, please head over to Substack and follow her at practicalmystics.substack.com. It's well worth having anything she offers land in your inbox, and I really hope that you find this episode as nourishing to your tender little soul as I did. Hey, Julie.
Hi, Kate.
I'm really excited to talk to you about practical mysticism because I want to understand more about what you mean by that term. It sounds very juicy to me, and I've experienced it directly. I've known you for years now and worked with you as a coach or as a spiritual counselor.
Mm.
Do you identify as a coach?
I don't.
Okay.
And I've asked that question many times over the last several years. I mean, I've been a practitioner, a spiritual practitioner is the actual term of
Okay.
the license that I got years ago. And that was in 2010. So over the years, I keep checking in like, I mean, am I really just a coach? And I don't, because I think that coaching is really helping people to get to a goal.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing that at all. I'm helping people to understand themselves, their life, their challenges through the lens of spirituality, earth school, practical mysticism, so it's not about getting somewhere. It's about
Mm.
being somewhere.
Ooh. Where do you want people to be?
Mm, that's a great question, Kate. I think my wish, my hope, my intention is for them to be in a state of peace with wherever they're at. So, if you go through a breakup, it's sad. It's really sad, and there's a lot of stuff that comes up. So, I'm not trying to get someone out of that feeling. I'm trying to help someone be at peace with the curriculum that is in front of them, and to bring more love to their humanness, more compassion to their humanness, and more of an understanding of kind of like their place in the grand scheme of things, like everything is all right already, that this
Mm.
breakup is not because you did something wrong, or if only I had done XYZ, then we'd still be together, that there's a divine design and you're held. So hopefully that would bring more peace to whatever is present.
Yeah. I know in our work together, I was bringing kind of my relationship,
Mm,
programming and tangled up naughtiness, and found the work we did together so profound in really shifting my sense of, yeah, like, I'm okay. It's gonna
hmm,
be okay, and if this is for me, there's nothing I can do to fuck it up, and if it's
mhm,
not for me, then,
mhm.
like, I can't do anything to keep it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. In fact, that's one of my favorite principles to lean on. Principle, just like a statement of truth, capital
yeah,
T, truth, which is if it's for you, it will find you. If it's not for you, you can't make it find you.
yeah.
Um, so there's a lot of letting go and trusting the process, and to me, that brings me a lot of relief. It's not up to me to, like, effort so much that I get it, that I get there, I get the thing, I get the money, I get the love, you know? It's more
Yeah.
so, just allowing myself to be at peace with me and to, like, vibe up in whatever way I want to around love or money or freedom or health, and let that come to me in its own perfect time.
Mm.
And, I know we said we wouldn't talk that much about astrology. I am admittedly a huge astro nerd, and I do use astrology a lot just to affirm and confirm because, man, it's right there. Like, "Oh, it's not your season for love." You know?
Yeah.
This is a
I mean, I
hard
do.
season, or, "Oh my gosh, you are about to really power up. You've got a lot of wind in your sails astrologically, no wonder why all this stuff is coming your way, and go for it." So it helps me it's like a twofer, like, not only do I have these principles and this spirituality says you're right on time, wherever you are, you're right on time, on purpose, but then I have astrology to back it up, so
Yeah, and anyone who's been listening to me for a while or reading, like, you've probably heard some Judaisms show up in passed down because you were really instrumental in helping me find a sense of spirituality that works for me,
No,
a
really?
relationship.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and, like, really embracing my woo. I know that we started work together, oh god, what was it? 2018 maybe? And
Yeah, way
I wasn't
back.
very astrologically out at the time. And I found it so wonderful and supportive to have space held for me to explore that and to figure out, like, who I am and what I want and what my relationship to all of this stuff
Mm,
is gonna be, and I know for me, that was a process that took a few years.
mm.
Moving to Portland, Oregon definitely helped because, like, I remember when I moved here, uh, within my first month of being here, kind of every initial meeting people conversation I had, somebody else would be like, "So what's your sign?" And I was like, "Oh, okay.
My
This is
people.
allowed here." Yeah, yeah. And so I'm
Mhm.
curious what your journey with spirituality has been a bit, and, like, how you came to this
Mm,
sense of knowing, this sense of ease and comfort with
mm.
God, the universe, and everything.
Oh, I haven't talked about that in so long. I
Oh.
love being able to talk about that. Thanks for asking me that question.
Well, Yeah, because I think in these times, especially as we move into talking about, like, practical mysticism, like,
Mhm,
contemporary, now moment mysticism, for a lot of us who maybe didn't grow up in religion or grew up with religion and were like, "That's not for me,"
mhm,
I have always really loved and appreciated the sort of expansive approach to spirituality and God
mhm,
that you have offered and that some of the teachers you've introduced me to have offered. And yeah, I think it's important to foreground that, like, for me, certainly, that wasn't just like an overnight, like, "Oh, yeah, like, now I'm on board with all of this, and it's just easy."
mhm.
Right? So, I think so many of us are seeking something,
Yeah, yeah,
but there's so many systems that are broken and failing and hurting and bad and ugh,
yeah.
that it can be hard to find our way.
I so agree with you, and I do believe that there's a spiritual revolution that is right now happening. A lot of people aren't feeling truly fed or nourished or connected and looking for ways to connect. And by the way, I fully support whatever way people find that nourishes their being, whether that's just nature or a community or just being, more in the Buddhist side of things. It's all good in the hood. So okay, but let me start to answer this question, this juicy
Ah,
question of yours. So, I actually grew up in the Christian faith, and it was a overwhelmingly positive experience. It was a net positive. I actually was a part of a sweet, loving, fun youth group,
oh, yay.
and a lot of the youth that were there were my besties from childhood and my brother's besties from childhood. So, we had a great sense of belonging there, and I know a lot of people don't have that in religion. They experience oftentimes, at least this is what I hear a lot, because these are the people that are coming to me,
Right.
an enormous amount of shame, an enormous amount of, I'm inherently bad or wrong, and I have to please God in order to receive the blessing or receive an answered prayer. I have to get it right in order to fill in the blank. And I just grew up in a community where there was a lot of love and a lot of
Mm,
belonging and a lot of joy too. Something did feel like it was missing for me. And cut to like after college is when I started to shed that. And then after college, I moved to New York City. And I moved in with like a college bestie who happened to be a Christian scientist.
okay.
Like, full on. Like, when she got sick, she would pray,
Oh,
like
Christian Scientists don't go to doctors, right? That's my
correct.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
but so Mary Baker Eddy was
Yeah,
the founder of Christian Science, and she like, around that time in our history, in our, like, country's religious history, there was religious science and there was science of mind. There was also Unity Church that was starting, so all these religions started to spring up around the same time. And even though I didn't go down the road of Christian Science, there was a lot of talking about God as a unitive force that, we are not separate, we are one.
hmm,
And that's how a Christian Science, works their healing, right? I am one with God, therefore, this sickness is a lie, it's an illusion. That's how they work with it. But it was the first time I had heard anything like this. And like my
yeah,
mind was blown, and I was watching this bestie of mine come down with the same cold that I had, and she'd get over it in a day.
huh,
It would be gone, and so I was witnessing that in action, and a lot of how she would speak to anything, go through the dating, world of your early 20s in New York City or trying to find progress in your career, and the way she would support me would be through her faith, but I found myself so inspired by it. And shortly after that, like my mid-20s, and I was exploring everything. I was very into astrology. I was exploring, a very spiritual form of yoga called Jiva Mukti. So I was exploring, all kinds of different faiths and going to all kinds of different, religious meetings or workshops or whatnot. And at the same time, I started to go through what I discovered only years later a term for, which is a dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
I had so much that the world tells you should make you happy. I was engaged to a really good guy. I had incredible friends. I was having success in a career that most people don't have success in. I had my health. I had, some amount of money, not a lot, but some, um, and I just had this sadness inside of me, this hole, this lack of fulfillment. And I was devouring books. This was before the internet really took off. So
Yeah.
people still read books a lot,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there were no Kindles.
Some of us still do.
Some of us still do, darn it.
We're holding on with our death grip, but, um
And there were 2 books that I just treasured. One of them was Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life. And, forever after that book, I have called her my fairy godmother. Like, she just speaks to me in a way that no one else does, and in my own path, like, that kind of love, but simplicity when talking about spirituality, that just gets me. And then, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle that had just come out, telling everyone my age, that had just come out, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh."
Okay, for those of us who haven't read it,
Mhm.
what's the takeaway? What's sum it up in 2 sentences,
I mean, it's all in the
totally
sentence,
unfair.
it's all in the
Yeah.
title,
Mhm.
that it's not about getting somewhere,
Mm.
like, that if we can just be fully present in the now moment, everything is there, everything.
Mm.
All the love, all the peace, all the abundance, like, whatever we're striving to get to, and by the way, hand raise that I still in all my spiritual practices strive to get
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah. I mean,
I have
I host this podcast, I write what I write, I talk to the people that I talk to because I need reminders because
yes, I'm
it's
still in a human suit.
progress, not perfection, and it takes effort. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the power of now. Just if you can be fully present in the now moment, that's where it's at. And actually, gosh, I'm kind of losing my timeline because I didn't read that book until after this experience that I'm about to tell you about. And that held a big key for me. So I'm reading things like Thich Nhat Hanh and Louise Hay, and I'm having insights, but it's not getting me out of this black hole. And I finally decided, and I had no reason to decide this for myself. I was not surrounded by a lot of people meditating. I just decided that was my answer. So I was going to meditate for 40 days. And again, no idea where I came up with that number. I just went, I'm going to meditate for 40 days. And it and I had no training. I had gone to no workshop. I had no idea what I was doing.
Mhm.
But there's a knower within us that knows the way, like we know how to be. We know how to be present. Our human will convince us otherwise, and we'll put up a lot of resistance, but that knower within, like our soul self, really, that's our natural state. So something within me really took to it right out of the gate. And one of the things that I would do is this gratitude prayer, and I would just be old school. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, for the fact that I'm breathing. And remember, I was so depressed. I had nothing that I felt truly like
Yeah.
that energy of gratitude. So just thanks for the sun. Thanks for my dog. Thanks for my friends. It was just boring, but I would do that. And it was around like the 10th day or something that I started to feel a shift. And I went into that gratitude prayer with a different there was juice. I finally had some juice, and I was really, really grateful for several things. And at one point, I just stopped with the gratitudes to begin my meditation, and something opened up for me. And it was my first mystical experience. I had no idea what was happening. It's just that everything fell away. My ego fell away, the mask of Julie fell away, my pain fell away. There was no, like, hot emotion. There wasn't even, like, joy. It was just peace, and nothingness, but everythingness. And I just stayed there for it felt like an eternity. I'm sure it was 5 seconds. And the moment I had a thought, and my thought was, "Oh my god, I'm really meditating, like, this is meditation." And the moment I had that thought, I got out of that space,
Yeah.
but and then shortly after that, I found the power of now, and that explained that space to me, like, oh my gosh, I had found the now. Um,
Yeah.
but I was so hungry to know more, like, it was more than just the power of now, like, it was something of truth, it was something of God that was more than what Bibles and religious texts had taught me. It was more than I had experienced or heard, and so I was just hungry for more, and, as fate would have it, as divine timing would have it, my then husband and I moved to California just because we were done with New York, and we moved within 10 minutes of the Agape International Spiritual Center, which if anyone has ever lived in LA, a 10-minute drive is just that just doesn't happen. Like, everywhere is at least 20 minutes, and really it's like 30 to 40 minutes. And Agape International Spiritual Center was one of the first, like, truly juicy, at the time it was religious science, but, it then shed its ties to religion and became, like, non-denominational, and it was my first taste of that, and I the first Sunday that I was in LA, I was at a service there, and Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith started to do his thing, and I felt transported, and I couldn't understand the words that he was saying, 'cause I wasn't there yet. It was like he was speaking a foreign language, but my soul knew, and I was just weeping and weeping the whole time, like, "This is truth. This is truth." And they were all things, just to give you all a taste of things that I was hearing, these principles that I talked about earlier, like the fullness of God is everywhere present. The fullness of God is everywhere present, like a sunbeam to the sun, like the sunbeam has the fullness of the sun in it, even though it is not the totality of the sun, but it has the fullness of the sun. And so
Mm.
the fullness of God is right where you're at. That means the fullness of love and light and peace and freedom and abundance and joy is right where you are, and just weeping with recognition of the truth. And at one point, he had the practitioners stand up and hold prayer, and I just went, "Yes, that is my path. That's what I'm to do. It's what I want."
Yeah.
And that was it. I was at Agape for 9 years straight, learning, and I became a licensed practitioner and praying with people and hanging out in the field. It was like a Hogwarts of spirituality, and, just a bunch of modern mystics all around me, and I just devoured it. Yeah, and
Right.
and it's interesting, I did wanna say one more thing, I did get out of that depression as I came to know more and more of the truth of who I am and whose I am and just my place in the universe, but also, being here on Earth. And I learned that there's a peace there. So it's not about getting out of Earth school curriculums, right? I got a divorce. I moved across the country. I had times of having $2 in my bank account, so I would still have my curriculums, but in knowing this truth, that there's no spot that God is not, or the fullness of God is everywhere present, like, it just brings more grace. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt like hell sometimes, but it just brings grace. So that's what I get super passionate about helping others with.
Yeah. I'm just sort of basking in the glow of that energy,
Mm,
right? You
mhm.
you really light up when you talk about it, and
Aw,
for me, as someone who didn't grow up going to church or in a religious practice of any kind,
mm,
my search for God or higher power or whatever I choose to call it on any given day was a lot less easeful.
mm,
Um, I remember before I got sober, I was really looking for something and having a hard time connecting with it. Traditional Judeo-Christians versions of God have never really, like, resonated for me,
yeah.
but I didn't know where to go, and I went to some church services, and I wanted what was there, but didn't feel like I belonged because at that time I was still drinking and had slept around a fair bit and,
Mhm.
it wasn't following the rules, so to speak, and one of the things I have so appreciated and has been so transformative in 12-step recovery is cultivating a relationship with a higher power.
Mhm.
But for me, it's been like a really slow unfolding, and it's been so helpful to have people in my life, either in recovery, or folks like you, to listen to and to really be able to just, like, marinate in other people's belief
Mhm.
and to see what it does.
Mhm.
I remember having a conversation when I was first getting sober with a friend who, I is very traditionally Christian. She actually was the one that took me to church with her a few times, and we were talking about God, and I was trying to figure out, like, what I believe and what I wanna believe and whatever, and she was like, "Man, that sounds so hard." Like,
Mm.
for her, she's like, "I have the Bible and I have church." Like, it's I don't have to
Mm.
question it because, like, I have this answer,
Mm.
you know?
Mm.
And what I have found is that now on the other side of my own spiritual journey is that having a relationship with a power greater than myself, having a sense of connection to source, to God, is so much easier. It
Mm.
is so hard to go through life feeling like the universe doesn't give a fuck about you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's lonely, huh?
Yeah.
Mm.
Lonely and it's scary, and it leaves me feeling like I have to do everything on my own
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. Well, and, still, when people find that connection, they still really struggle with feeling that it's all on their shoulders, you
Oh,
know?
yeah, like,
Yeah.
hand up, that's still a thing for me,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
as I'm, like, in entrepreneur land
Right.
now. I have to
Mhm.
keep coming back to, like, "Oh, wait, like, I don't actually believe that I have to do this all on my own, I just forget all the time.
Mhm.
I don't believe that."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. You know, as you were talking, I was trying to imagine which path is harder, right? To grow up without any connection to God, or to grow up with a very judgmental, punitive form of God. And I think both have their
Yeah, I don't think it's
detriment,
a competition, I think they're both
Yeah.
really
Yeah, they're both really hard. They're
yeah.
both really hard. I know even though I had this loving community, I still, to this day, have to check myself for good girl for God syndrome.
Yeah.
That's a big one for me, and, actually, now that I say it, I recognize that I've come a long way because it's not super present in me, anymore, but, doing things in order to be a good girl,
Yeah.
doing it the
Oh, I
right
do know. I know that one real good. It's just my inner critic and perfectionist. Like, it didn't have
Yeah,
anything to do with God. It just had to do with this, like, interpolated sense of,
yeah,
like, I am fundamentally always not enough,
yeah, ooh,
which I've also come a really long way with.
yeah. Yeah,
Um,
you really have, Kate. I think too, and this is something I've been working with some clients for, gosh, 6 months now. It's a new program that I developed because I went through this myself, of realizing that for me, I had a pretty big father wound, and realizing what a cock block that was
mhm.
to really knowing God, because I was projecting unknowingly the traits of my father onto God. And it's just because I was wired that way, that I had to do it all, my dad definitely had some narcissistic traits about him, and, it was all about him, and so I just had to be the perfect one, the sweet one, the kind one, the not messy one, et cetera, and I just totally recreated that in my relationship to God. So, not only are we, up against, quote, unquote, right, either a shameful religion imprint, or no teachings around God or something greater imprint, but also there's our parental imprints,
Yeah.
that we get to unpack and dismantle before we can really feel the love of God. I mean, if you did not have a loving parent, and bless them, a lot of parents just did the best they could,
Yeah.
they were wounded themselves and not knowing how to heal. But if you did not receive a lot of love or if you received a lot of negative messages, that's gonna stand in your way of feeling that true connection to source. So, finding that connection to something greater is not the easiest thing in the world. People wanna
No.
believe that it's just about, kind of like my aha moment, right? Like, you just start to meditate and 10 days in, you connect to the infinite space. Like, it's not
No.
usually like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's why you're on your journey and the rest of us get to come to you to talk to about this stuff, right?
Right.
Um, and lately especially, I don't know why this is coming up for me, but, like, lately especially, I've just been so aware of and present with the slow unfolding,
Mm,
right? Of thinking of myself like a tree. And again, this is probably because I live in Portland now and I have started gardening, but, like, you plant a goddamn seedling and the thing doesn't, like, immediately become a tree.
mm,
It takes years
mhm.
for trees to be trees, and I just am so amused with my precious little human for thinking that I'm gonna, like, plant myself in certain areas of life or
Yeah,
certain practices, and then, like, "Oh, I'm gonna be a tree in 6 months." Like, that's just
right.
not
Oh
how it
gosh,
works.
it's so common, so common.
Yeah.
I so identify with that and or relate to it. And when you said what was the first thing you said? The slow roll or
Oh, the slow unfolding?
the slow unfolding, I felt like a total relaxation in my system, just that phrase, the slow unfolding, that's so beautiful. I almost want you to write a whole book on that. Um,
Ooh, someday I probably will, but it won't happen overnight.
yeah. But it right, exactly. It made me think of when I got my license as a spiritual practitioner, I really thought that I was there, wherever there is. I thought I had made it, that I was there, that I now knew the truth of the universe, and I was going to proceed forward and start manifesting like a crazy woman, like everything would just bloom. And what I ran into instead was the healing chapter of my life. Like,
Yeah.
that was okay, here's my learning and my education, and now here's all the healing that has been waiting for me to have some greater understanding around these things. And it was, another like that agape section was 9 years. It was another 9 years of really working deeply on all these wounds, these false imprints, these false ideas and stories, until I could have some kind of coherence in my system or some kind of like inner integrity between it's not just now what I know about God. It's now like it's in my bones and my blood. I've now lived. I've had to live these truths. So that's 18, 20 years on the path, and I feel more integrated now, but that doesn't mean that I'm there. I don't I'm sure there's going to be a whole host of curriculums in front of me to go even deeper with all of this. So the slow unfoldment just feels so good. It feels so loving,
Yeah,
so
and, like,
loving.
to use your term, like, just the, like, long curriculum,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, I'm amused, like, I spent 8 years in grad school to get my PhD, and I
Oh,
guess, like, thinking about, most of this stuff doesn't happen in a semester.
yeah,
Like,
yep,
it's not,
yeah,
we take the first class, and then there's another class, like,
yeah, yeah.
um
And, I just wanna I wanna speak to whoever's listening here and just say, like, our souls remember that on the other side, there is no interference. There's no density that we're navigating. So it makes sense that we get down here and we hold on to a nugget of remembering. "Oh, it's quick. I want love. It's quick. Love is right here. Oh, abundance, it flows. It flows from my being out into the world and returns to me tenfold." Like, it's like there's these things that even if our human doesn't remember, our soul remembers. And so it makes sense that we get here and we think that things are gonna happen lickety split, but then we wake up to, "Oh gosh, no, I agreed to be here on Earth, and the Earth school is one of density and contrast and the learning when it doesn't happen lickety split, when I have to line up, not just energetically or spiritually, but also, on the physical material plane too, it's a whole different game here. And so for whoever's listening, if you too have been the lickety split, this is going to happen super quick. I think we all are that way. And I think
Yeah.
that's you remembering who you really are and where you come from.
Mm. That just feels like a warm blanket, that idea of, like, remembering who we are and where we came from.
Yeah, there's just so much shame to constantly weed through. So many messages of shame, even in the collective consciousness, you know? Like, "Oh, this guy didn't pick me on Tinder. I must not be pretty enough, good enough, smart enough, witty enough," whatever it happens to be. There's such a like, I'm now going to put all the blame on me for somehow getting it wrong. "Oh, I didn't get this job. It's because my resume wasn't great, or I didn't have enough education, or whatever it happens to be." There's always there's so much gunk to swim through, so much shame layers to swim through, and I don't know how people get out of that shame just on their own without, I mean, sure, like, maybe
I mean, I
self-awareness,
didn't.
self-help. Huh?
I didn't. Like, I
Yeah.
it takes therapy and other people and, sharing about it.
Mhm.
Um, right?
Mm.
Like, I don't think there is a way out on your own,
Yeah.
personally. That's my
Yeah.
personal stance
I
on that.
totally agree, right? We need each other. We need
Yeah.
each other. And then I would say that for me, I don't know how I would get through that without also adding that layer of a connection to something greater, a greater
Yeah.
power, one that is loving me 24/7 unconditionally in my human journey.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, like, my kind of up leveling as a human and in my emotional well-being and all of it came after I got sober.
Mm.
I got sober at 27. Like, I was doing the things
Mhm.
on the surface, and I was in grad school and I was on track, and, but I had that hole inside of me, that
Mm.
shame pit, the whatever you wanna
Mm.
call it. And it took me getting into 12-step recovery and finding a program designed to be like, "Hey, believe in something bigger than you.
Mhm.
You get to pick what it is." Like, that's what I
Mhm.
really loved, was that
Mm.
there was this expansiveness of, like, you get to pick whatever this is,
Mm.
but life really will get better if you believe that you are not in charge of everything all the
Mhm.
time.
Mm.
Like, and that has been my experience, even if it was a, like, slow unfolding.
Mhm.
Um yeah, so I'm just a huge proponent of community and connection and mutual support and witnessing,
Mhm.
and how vital that is to emotional well-being.
Mhm. Me too, me too.
I'm gonna make a abrupt pivot because I want to actually ask, okay, what do we mean by practical mysticism? Let's,
Ah, perfect time.
yeah,
Perfect time to ask that. So, I mean, the breakdown of the word literally would be the practice of mysticism, putting your mysticism into practice, taking it to the streets, making it a
okay,
part of your everyday life. What I like to say is practical mysticism is about learning these higher truths, learning the nature of the cosmos and your place in it, learning who you are and whose you are, and then using that in your everyday life. So if I'm uh driving and I get a ticket. Right? So Julie without practical mysticism might feel victimized, might want to blame the cop, might want to blame myself. Julie with practical mysticism is going to practice, and it's not perfectionism, it's practice, is going to practice saying, okay, this is for me, not against me. This is for me, not against me. Like, everything in life is all right already. There's a perfect order to all of life. Okay, so now I can let go of shame and blame in either direction, or I can practice letting go of shame and blame in either direction. And I can open my eyes and say, what's here? What's here for me to learn? What within me needed this experience? What is this experience showing me or teaching me? Or perhaps I have a great conversation with the police person, and there's some connection there that I can just say there was something about that, and I that fed me. Perhaps it fed him or her, and I'm just going to trust that everything's all right already, and that was part of the perfection of the timing of things. And so that's how you work with it. Now that's just a little thing, but you take it to a bigger thing like a divorce,
Yeah.
or, a loss of something, loss of an important career or loss of health or loss of a loved one. Ooh, and that is the master level of practical mysticism, but taking it to loss, like, okay, nothing is ever truly lost. If it is for me, it will find me. This job clearly was no longer aligned with me for some reason, and I'm going to trust that the knower knows the way. The infinite knower in back of all things and all beings knows the way here. So there must be something better for me. Or maybe there's something creative in me that I haven't been allowing because I've been in a secure container and let myself be rigid around that. I want security over everything else. Loss of a loved one. There's no loss. There's no loss. Life is infinite. This person is right here with me right now. I just can't. They're not in human form. So how can I work with this? How can I bring compassion to my humanness? How can I bring compassion to my anger? If there's no spot that God is not, that means that God is with you when you're angry, that the presence of the universe is with you when you're sad, that God can take your, blame of God, right? So these are just some examples, but taking the mystical and bringing it into your everyday life so that there's more grace.
Mm.
And I think ultimately it leads you to unleashing more of who you really are into the world, right? If I'm undoing knots of blame and shame or not enoughness, I'm starting to realize who I am, then I'm going to unlock my gifts, my natural inherent gifts and talents, and I'm going to know that I'm safe to give them out into the world in bigger and bigger ways, or however I'm called to give them. And by the way, some of us, those natural gifts and talents might be a smile, a laugh, a joke, might be being a wonderful mother or father or a wonderful gardener. But the peace that's there when you let yourself be more authentic with who you are and to give more freely from that space, it's pretty worth it, pretty worth the road taken.
Yeah. Yeah. And
How
it's
did that land with you? Because I just kinda went rat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat.
oh, no, it landed great. Like, it was just I mean, I've been working with and following you for a long time, so this is familiar messaging to me,
Mhm,
and there is this sense of peace and relief in the idea,
mhm,
right, that nothing is wrong, that
mhm,
I didn't do anything wrong, and that the work is in peeling back the layers and letting myself be who I actually am. I mean, that's one
mhm,
of the things I took out of that
mhm,
has been very true for me and been part of my journey in the last several years that you've gotten to witness is, doing this podcast, right? Stepping more and more into what I do believe is my path and I do believe my higher power would have me be,
mhm,
and it's fucking scary because it
mhm,
requires faith and it requires really trusting in myself and trusting in the universe, and that even if and when well, even when this doesn't go exactly how I want it to go or how I envision that, like, that doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong or
mhm,
that I'm off track.
mhm,
It's in the unfolding, and it's in the ways in which, like, that grows me, that I get to experience the fullness of life.
mhm, mhm,
This is a podcast all about claiming joy, but I've been talking lately, like, I was in a depression pit last month, and the truth
mhm,
is that knowing lows helps me appreciate the highs.
mhm,
Right? That life really is about contrast, and that
mhm,
part of going into the pit or the dark nights of the soul that we all have at different points in time is just one aspect of getting clearer and clearer on, like, what I'm actually supposed to be doing
mhm,
and who I'm actually supposed to be being and who I want to be and what I want to be different,
mhm, mhm,
and for me there's a lot of, like, leaning into community and learning how to receive
mhm,
and learning how to be imperfect and vulnerable and good enough in my imperfection,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And, like, suiting up and showing up.
Suiting up and showing up.
Yeah,
That's
that's
a
a
great
kind of
phrase.
recovery phrase that is used in sort of, like, just, like, going to meetings whether you want to or not, and
Mhm,
but I like it,
mm,
it's like suiting up and showing up for our commitments and being where we are
Mhm.
instead of slapping a happy face when we don't have it to slap.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you know, I
Well, and that leads to another, like, trap, that's easy to get into, which is that, like, kinda bypassy, like, toxic
mhm,
positivity,
yeah,
right? Where oftentimes, like, if you're in a healing lane, whether that's through
yeah,
self-awareness or through spirituality or even through religion, there can be that chapter where you think that it's about just being in that positive affirmative space all the time, affirming your health and your wellness and not flinching from that and having shame or blame or guilt when you do have those moments of sadness or depression or anger. And just to step into something, whether it's, the sober community or whether it's a spiritual community or whether it's just a community of friends that affirms that right where you are, like, you're perfect, you are lovable, you are enough. And to recognize that these emotions are catalysts and they're way showers and they're messengers and they're teachers and they're valid. That is so transformative to have that, and I'm really hopeful, even with the outer picture that we have right
yeah,
now,
yeah.
I'm really hopeful, and I'm gonna drop some astrology here with Pluto and Aquarius until 2043, that we will get there. We will get there to not just these small communities here and there, but a larger, broader, collective sense of belonging to one another and, letting go of shame and blame and, a lot of the ways that we separate ourselves from one another.
Good. I'm also well, I don't know if I'm, like, cosmically hopeful, so it was really good to hear from you to say it. But I think, like, I have felt really micro level hopeful of,
Mhm.
like, this is the opportunity to lean into each other,
Mhm.
to really cultivate the community that is immediately around us,
Yeah.
and to show up, and to nourish, and to water.
Yeah.
Um, that, like, that's the call of the times.
Absolutely, and may I share what your rising sign is?
Yes.
So Kate has an Aquarius rising, and, so she is here to be a leader of the Aquarian times. So you just spoke to it 100%. Like, I think that what's going on right now is driving us into each other's arms,
Mhm.
because how else are we gonna survive if not having a place where we can be held and heard fully?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and even though the outside world, is a lot of scaries or wobblies, can bring up a lot of scaries or wobblies, that phrase, and excuse me for being cheesy, it's always darkest before the dawn, like, it's the sickness that you're sickest right before the fever breaks, and I saw this someone quoted somewhere, I don't know, Blue Sky or Threads or something like that. Someone quoted, "I think we're closer to the end than we are to the beginning."
Hmm.
And I found that to be so true, speaking about what's happening politically.
Yeah, and that just gave me, like, a little bit of goosebumps, like, not the end of the world, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're not closer to the apocalypse than we are to the beginning. We're closer to the sort of end of whatever the fuck gunk
Yeah.
than we are to the beginning of it. I
Yeah,
think
and
so.
even if it is apocalyptic, like I actually have a weird, I like that space, weirdly so, because, and I like the phrase that came through me, like, it just runs us into each other's arms.
Yeah.
It's times like that where everyone's masks fall away and you're just raw and vulnerable. So I'm hopeful that, as the systems start to dismantle, that what will emerge, is going on the other side is going to be way better and way more about unity. I mean, I was talking about I had a Zoom call and during all this chaos that's emerging right now, and I wanted to start it by talking about the power of the light. And so, funnily enough, I just did a little chat GPT, like, what's the power of light over darkness or something like that. And chat GPT gave me a great response that I quoted in this workshop, which is there is no power in darkness. Darkness does not have power because darkness is just the absence of light.
Mm.
And and actually, there's no place that light is not. It's kind of like there's no spot that God is not. There's no place that light is not. It's just where there is light and where there is light that's unaware of itself. But
Mm.
it's all light. So whether you're going like the scientific light versus dark or the spiritual version that I talked about, like the lightness is where it's at and that's the thing that has the power and it is infinitely more powerful and potent than any shred of darkness could ever be or shadow. So I have it on good authority that the light will prevail, and it just takes way showers and practical mystics and people that are willing to be the love or willing to be the peace or willing to be the stand, the advocate um, when they're called. And not all of us are going to be called in the same way, of course. And it's important that we each take our own guidance seriously during these times.
Yeah. I really feel so called to be the love.
The love is the word.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I just really appreciated that because, yeah, some of us are supposed to be the advocate. Some of us are supposed to be this, that, and the other thing, and it
Mm,
can be so easy for me as just a, like, tender-hearted, highly sensitive human to feel like to get really caught up in the, like, "I'm not doing enough. I should be more assertively activist," and,
mm,
the
mhm,
shoulds creeping
yeah.
in. And I think that, like, what is true for me, at least in this moment, is that my pocket of space and my calling and what's true for me is offering love and
Mm,
compassion and connection and care. I have
mm,
a tremendous capacity for that.
mm, mm. My goodness, like, imagine a world in which you felt shamed into doing something that wasn't your true nature, and we had to miss out on all your love and care and compassion,
Yeah.
which I think is so needed, so
Yeah.
needed, and, like, here's the principle that I would see in this, which is that we are all divinely designed, you know?
Mm.
We are all divinely designed. Like the person that's just a good comedian, a good jokester, that is by divine design. Like that is needed, that is necessary. I mean, how many times have I been moved by a comic, just needing the levity for a night, needing that, needing to get out of my seriousness, needing to get out of my head. Or sometimes comics can put things together that are so incredibly potent because they open our hearts and then they zing us with those zingers. So, to let yourself follow your own divine design. And for some listening to this podcast, it might just be being a good mother or being a good friend or being a good, community person. Just bringing the love, the care, compassion that you were speaking of, that is huge. I mean, those are the
Yeah.
qualities that we're looking to have more of in this world. So how could that not be a beautiful thing and an additive thing to what we're all doing? And those people that are all called to be the door knockers and the petition writer uppers, they need the levity, they need the care, they need the nourishment, they need those places and spaces where they can soften and be held. So, we all have our place in this web that's happening right now. And the important thing is to listen to your God signals, to your inner voice and where it's calling you and how it's calling you. And that's how we all just show up for our assignment right now. Like I don't even know where this is going. Um,
Ooh, I think it's going into you praying us out is what I think. I'm feeling right there. That feels like
okay.
a nice moment for
Yeah,
us
let's
really to just offer a prayer for whoever's listening.
so happy to do that. And let me say before I go into prayer, I do a style of prayer, and the label is called affirmative prayer.
Mm.
Um, so I just wanted to put that out there in case you're going like, what is that? Like you can look it up. You can Learn,
I'll
you
put
can
it in the show
practice
notes. I'll
yourself.
Google it for us.
Yeah. Okay. So I just invite everyone to take a deep breath and just to remember that there's no spot that God is not. That means that in your fingernail, like right now, my hands are together and I'm feeling my fingernails. And like God, the fullness of God is in each and every cell and tissue. The fullness of God is right where you are in each blood cell that makes up your heart. And then all the things that make up a cell, I don't even know scientifically enough. Like the fullness of God, it's fractal, like the tiniest thing that there can be. What is it? A neutron, an atom? The fullness of God is right there. And then that fullness just grows and expands, becomes a blade of grass, becomes a tree, becomes a bird, becomes a me, becomes a you. And what is that fullness of God? The fullness of God is, at its core, love. The substance that's in back of the entire universe is love. Unconditional love. Unconditional love. No judgment. No assigning good, better, best. Unconditionally loving. Just take a moment and imagine that. Unconditionally loving. If you have a child, if you have an animal, you know this. Unconditional love. It doesn't matter what I do. I stepped on my dog's ear today. She loves me. It doesn't matter what your child does, how big of a mess they make. You will love them. And God's love is infinitely more. So if the fullness of God is everywhere present, if there's no spot that God is not, that means that God is through in and as each and every person on this earth right now, through in and as each blade of grass, each grain of sand, each drop in the ocean. And yes, even in our government, even in our political sphere, even in our celebrity sphere, even everywhere, everywhere. And so we can know that God is on the scene, that there is something unfolding that is for us and not against us. And we might have fear. God knows our fear. We might have anger. God loves us in our anger. We might want a particular outcome. God loves our creative energy, our desires, our yearning. And yet there's one thing that is assured, that the light will prevail. And so whatever is happening right now, it's a curriculum for us to know more of love, more of belonging, more of freedom, more of joy, more of peace and harmony. These are all divine qualities. And so we just bless what seems like the mess. We bless it. And I'm speaking about like a bigger scene, but this could also be in your own life. There might be a mess in front of you. There might be a mess in your relationship. There might be a mess in your physical body. There might be a mess with money. God is loving you. And there's a beautiful curriculum that's unfolding here. And on the other side, there will be more you, more truth, more authenticity of you, and more of you to give to this world. And so we just give thanks for that. I give thanks for Kate's podcast. I give thanks for Kate's curiosity. And I give thanks for each and every one of you listening here. Thank you for being here on earth. Thank you for bringing you to earth. You are so needed. You are so loved. And so it is. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please help me grow the podcast by subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with anyone you think would benefit from hearing it too. Your support means the world to me. If you'd like to get updates about new episodes, posts, and offerings, please visit settlingisbullshit.com to subscribe to my newsletter. You can also find information there about working with me one-on-one to build your most amazing life. Until next time, remember that I believe in you, and that you are fucking awesome.